Join me in making a cross ladder stitch and ladder stitch combo. Full process of a book that lays completely flat. First, you'll need some book covers. For the sake of this demo, and also because I wanted to, I'm using canvas boards. These are just 5x7s. You'll also need some paper. If your paper isn't cut exactly the size of your book, you'll have to tear or cut it down. So a cutting mat is very helpful. Also, you'll want a metal ruler. The reason is you're after that metal edge. It'll make very easy work of tearing down your paper. And you'll need scrap paper and a pencil. A bone folder is also helpful. Not necessary. You can just fold it by hand if you need to. And you'll need a needle. Curved are very easy to work with compared to straight. The thread I'm using today is polyester thread. So it's just leatherworking thread or bookbinding thread I found online. It's relatively cheap. I also have beeswax to make the thread a little bit more grippy. An awl is very helpful too, but you can use a needle or a thumbtack to poke holes with. To get started, the first thing you need to do is measure the dimensions of your covers. So we're laying our covers side by side, and what we're doing is we're seeing how big our paper needs to be. Take your scrap paper and your pencil, and you're going to write it down. So what I'm seeing, that if I open up my book is 10 inches long or 10 inches wide, however you want to say it, and it is almost 7 inches tall. Because I don't want paper hanging out the side, I'm actually going to lessen those measurements just a little bit. If your pages are the exact size of your covers, you can skip this step. But if you need to tear down paper, hang out with me a second and I'll show you how. It's very easy. If you have a cutting mat, you can easily use it to help you tear down your paper. What I like to do is go ahead and mark my measurements on my mat. That way, when I go to tear my paper down, I can just look right at the mat where my marks are and rock and roll. If you want to go with the grain of the paper, you can. You can easily test it by folding the paper. The way it folds the easiest is the way you need to use the paper in your book. But if you're on a budget like I am, sometimes that's not feasible. So today we're going with the way the paper fits best for my budget. So let's tear our paper. Super easy. You're going to line up your paper on that zero line of the mat. Then place your ruler across the two marks you made and then just tear it. You're tearing against the metal edge of the ruler. Ta-da! There you go. And then flip it and do the other side. You'll repeat this for all the paper that you need. For a more detailed explanation, check out the little video linked up top or in the description. So what do you do if you actually got one of your papers off a little bit? So let's talk about that real quick. So I have my stack of paper and I notice one is slightly longer. You can use that ruler and a guide and then a box cutter or X-Acto knife or craft knife and just line it up and slice it against your ruler. Ta-da! Super easy fix. Usually it takes a few passes. Don't try to get through all in once. You can end up ripping your paper. To check your paper, really easy. Just take one, fold it in half, and compare it to your covers. It should fit. Our next step is to divide up our papers for each signature. So a signature is a section of a book, and for this book, the binding looks better, and you can see it more easily if the signatures are more thick. Today I'm using 9 pages. And then I'm going to take each stack, and I'm going to even them up, and then I'm going to use my bone folder to fold them over. If you fold all your pages together, they'll be all nicely tucked into each other, and you won't have any gaps. So I'm going to do this for the rest of my signatures. It's ready to have holes poked, but first, what I like to do is press my pages. And so how you do that, you take your pages and a scrap piece of paper, lay the paper down first on a flat surface, and then you're going to take your pages, and I like to divide them up so that they're even, and I place them down on that scrap piece of paper, and then cover it with another scrap, and pile books on top and let them sit at least a day or a few hours. Usually it's overnight. And this way they get all compressed, and that way over time the book does not become loose. Grab your pages, and now is a good time to check the size of your book with your covers. So when you're looking at it, it's a little thick. So what I'm doing is I'm taking out 2 of the signatures. I'll save them for another book. And there you go. Now I have 6. Now it's time to make a template. This is the template I made for this book, but I'm going to also show you how to make one yourself. Take a scrap piece of paper and line it up with your cover of your book. And you're going to mark the edge of the book cover. Mine is just a hair under 7 inches, so mine is 6 5/8. You also want to mark the top of the template. So I placed an arrow. If you round up, what will happen is your thread will be very close to the edge of your pages and it could rip through. So if in doubt, round a little bit down. I like to go 3/8 of an inch in, First, I'm measuring the turnaround spots of the thread. So I'm going in 3/8 of an inch from each side and making a mark. I'm using my ruler just as basic measurement according to the inch. That way I don't have to do any math. I just line it up with the inch and I know how to go. Then I'm going in a 1/2 inch from those last marks that I made on both sides. Next, I'm measuring where the X or the cross will be. So I'm going to go an inch wide on that little cross, and I'm lining it up, and then I'm going to make my marks on both sides. I like the look of 5/8 measurement between the cross and the ladder stitch. So that is what I'm marking now. And then the remainder in between is just the ladder stitch. And so I'm going to leave that alone. And then the template is done, and you can double check it if you want to, and I'll write it down. I think I wrote 1 7/8. Yep. And we're good to go. And now it's time to put the holes in the covers. I'm marking on the inside of the cover. This way the marks are on the inside. If you were using a cutting mat, super duper easy to line it up on the zero edge and go out from that edge 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch, whatever you like. I'm going 1/2 inch out, lining it up, and then I'm going to make a mark. Double check your marks with your ruler, make sure they're correct, and then we can go ahead and place our holes. Take your template, line it up at the top of your book along the line that you just drew, and then mark the spaces for each hole. Grab your awl or another sharp object such as a thumbtack or a needle that you can poke holes with, and we're going to poke each of those dots you just placed. So what I'm doing is I'm only poking the hole just enough to where I get a little bit of bump, a little tiny hole out the other side, and then I flip the cover over and I finish poking the holes going back from the outside in, and that way I don't have a big mountain or molehill popping out the top of my book. If you do, it's no big deal. You can take the back of an awl or another hard object and smash it down. I repeat this for all holes on the first cover. If you forgot to mark the top of the cover, it's no big deal. Just line up the template and go ahead and place your mark or write top at the top edge of the book. Take the second cover, line them up, and go ahead and mark the top of that cover as well. And then to get the holes lined up for that second cover, put the covers together, lay them down, hold them down tight, and use the holes of the first as a guide to poke the holes of the second. As you press through, it's going to make a mark on that second cover, and then you'll be able to take off the first, see the little marks, and go ahead and poke the holes the rest of the way through. Just like before, I'm not going all the way through, just enough so that I get a little nib going on the outside, and I can use that as a guide to poke the hole from the outside in. It's okay if you don't do it that way. There's multiple ways to do this. This is just the way that I found that I like to do it. Now it's time for the signatures. Lay your template down, take a signature, line it up on the edge, and I'm going to mark the top where the top of the template is. I'm marking the top of my signature, and then I'm marking each little mark that I see along the edge, making sure the template is lined up. And then I'm going to repeat this for the rest of my sections. And there are many ways to do this. Feel free to try different ways, but make sure you always mark the top of each signature. This will keep your signatures and your covers all in line. You'll line your signatures up, and what I'm doing is I have a piece of corkboard down. Cardboard works too. That way it's easier for the awl to go through the signature. I line my signature up, place it down, and then I poke through the holes. That's it, and I'll repeat this for each one. If you place your signature where it opens up down towards the table, when you poke a hole from the outside in, any excess paper will go out of the hole into the inside of the book, and it won't be hanging out of the outside of your edges. So when you bind it, you won't see it. Check your signatures, and if there's any little pencil marks left over, just erase them. That's all I'm doing here, and I check each one of them. Now it's time to sew. So what you're going to need is some thread. I'm using polyester wax thread. It's cheap. I got it offline. And then beeswax, and then a needle. The needle I'm using today is a curved needle because it is easier to do the stitch. You probably will run out of thread for this stitch because of the crosses, but to guess how much you need, we're going to take our thread and pull it a length for each cover and each signature. So in my case, I have 2 covers and 6 signatures, so that's what I'm doing. It would be better to run out of thread on the stitch than to have super long thread. So don't worry if you run out, there's an easy knot we can do to add more. So to wax your thread, what you'll do is you'll place your thread between your thumb and the beeswax and then pull. It's the friction that transfers the wax onto the thread, and I do this about 2 or 3 times. Thread your needle and leave a little tail, and then at the very end I'm tying just a regular overhand granny knot, overhand knot, doesn't matter, and I do it twice, and then I smash the knot to make it flat. You see it's really flat. Double check that all your signatures in your cover are the right side up, all the arrows match. I like to start at the front of the book and work my way back. So what I'm doing is I'm placing the front cover down and then the first signature. And then you're going to take your needle and you're going to go through the inside of the book on that first hole and pull it all the way until the knot goes in the crease of the signature. So you can see the thread is hanging out of the signature. Now I'm going to go around the outside of the front cover, in through the hole, and then between the inside of that cover in the signature. Now pull the thread until it becomes tight, and you'll see that it should be snugged up against the cover and looped around. So I'm going to flip it over so you can see it. It should look just like that. Next, we're going to loop around that thread that attached the cover. You can see where my needle is. It's looping around that one thread, and then I'm pulling. And you're going to pull until it becomes tight. You don't want to wrench it, but you can pull the thread a little bit to tighten it up. That's what it looks like. And now we're going to go back through the hole. The needle should be on the inside, and try to avoid the knot, but if you can't, it's okay. Hold the knot down with your finger if you need to, and pull. And then we're going to go out the next hole. The process is the same. So you're going out the hole, and then you're going to loop around the outside of the cover, stay to the left-hand side, go back into the cover on the inside, and then between the cover and the signature. The thread should come out to the left of that thread that was looping around. Just like we did on the first one, we're going to loop around the thread that came out of the signature and pull it, and then you can tighten it up a little bit. Remember, don't wrench it. Tighten it up and then stick the needle back in the hole to the inside of the signature. And now we move on to hole number 3. You will repeat this same step for each hole on the cover, except when we get to the last one, it's just a little bit different because we'll be adding the new signature. As the thread goes between the pages of the signature and the cover, when you're staying to the left, you're actually sewing in the direction that we're going in anyway. That's the whole point for keeping it to the left. If you accidentally put the thread to the right, it's not the end of the world. If you don't want to undo it, you don't have to, but that is why we're staying to the left on this side. So going on to the next hole, you are welcome to skip ahead, but remember, you're going out the hole, then go between the cover and the signature. You're going to stay to the left, place the needle between, keep to the left, and then loop the thread that came out of the signature, and then go back into the signature, and then move on to the next hole. By now you're starting to get the hang of it, so keep that in mind when we do the last cover, because the process is very similar. If you find that you enjoy bookbinding or have done books before, this is just like most books that you use one needle for. So you're going out the signature, going back to the front of the cover to the inside, between the signature and the pages, looping around the thread that came out of the signature, and then back into the next hole. And then we'll repeat this for 2 more. So out the hole and then looping around the outside the cover. If your thread gets twisted, you can always take a second and untwist it, and that'll make it lay flat. So sometimes the holes in the cover are not big enough for the needle, and if you need to go back and widen them a little bit more with the needle or the awl, totally fine. So I'm still staying to the left. You'll start finding the book is a lot easier to work with now that the cover and the signature are becoming attached. So staying to the left, and I'm looping around the thread that came out of the signature, tightening it up, and then going back in the hole. You'll know you tightened it too much if the cover and the signature want to fly open. Next to last hole, everything is still the same. So out the signature and then looping around the cover. It helps me to keep the book open as I work, but you might find it's easier to do a different way. So I'm staying to the left, and then I'm looping around the thread that came out of the signature, tightening it up, and then back into the hole. The cover is almost attached, so you're going to go out the hole of the signature, and then you'll loop around the outside of the cover just like you did before. You can stay to the left just like you did before, and then we'll catch that thread, make our little loop, but we won't go back in the hole of the signature. This is when we'll add the next one. Once again, sometimes I stay to the right. Either way works. What we've done is made a little knot. Now we take our next signature and make sure that both arrows are pointing up, so all our holes are lined up, and you're going to go in that first hole. There you go. The needle's on the inside. We're going to pull it all the way in, and then we're going to go out the next hole on the signature. You'll pull that thread completely through. Then you'll take the needle and loop down below to that thread that connects the cover and the first signature. You can see the needle. If you open up the cover and the signature, you can see it. Go ahead and pull it through, and that's what it should look like. And now we're going through the third hole. So if you need to open up the signature, that's completely okay. You're going through the third hole and you're going to pull the thread until it gets tight. Go back out the second hole. So we're kind of working backwards a little bit. Go back out, see how it's coming out, and you're going to pull that thread. Loop from the left to the right and catch that thread that's coming out of the first signature, the third one that connects to the cover. You see how the needle is going around it, and you're going to pull the thread through, and we're making the second part of your X. Sometimes the thread gets twisted, so if you want it to look more neat, take a second and untwist that thread. If you are working with flat thread like I am, sometimes this happens. If you're working with round thread, this is really not a problem. Go back in that third hole, and now you've made your first cross. Ta-da! That's what it should look like. Then go out the fourth hole. We're starting the ladder stitch. This is a little different. The first step is to go out that hole, and you're going to pull the thread. We're going to make a loop, but we're going to go from the right this time to the left, catching that fourth thread coming out of the first signature in the cover. See how if you open it up, you can see the needle. I'll pull the thread, and it's making a loop, but kind of going backwards. Retain that little loop. Go through the loop. Basically, you're making a kettle stitch. Pull the thread. And what we're doing is we're making the first part of the ladder. You can do it different ways. This is the way that I like how it looks, and so I kept doing it. We make a kettle stitch. Check it out. Go across. You're going from the right to the left again. You can see that needle coming out. Catch that fifth thread between the cover and the first signature. There's my needle. Pull the thread. You do not have to go through another loop. Do you see how it matches the first side? That's what you want. You want them to match. So this one, you're not going through a loop. We're just going to go back up into that hole right above us. That should be the 1, 2, 3, fifth hole. Yep, there you go. That's what it should look like. We made our first ladder. Go out the next hole. We're about to do our second cross. You are looping from the left to the right. Loop that thread that connects the cover between the first signature and the cover. You see there's the needle. I'm looping that one thread. And you're going to pull the thread through. Just like before, we're going back in the next hole of that signature that we're adding. So this will make the first part of the X. Pull the thread through. Then go back out that last hole. That's what it should look like. Pull the thread all the way through. Keep on going. There you go. And then go across and loop that next thread that connects the cover. Make sure that you're looping the thread. If you need to open up the cover in the signature, totally fine. Pull the thread through. Fix the thread if you need to. And then you'll go back in the current signature. You have made the pattern. You'll probably start to see why it's more important to have a thicker signature with more pages or thicker paper. That way you can see the X's. Go out that last hole. We're doing another kettle stitch. So you're pulling the thread through. Since we're going to be working back the other direction, let's put it to the left side this time. And you're going to pull the thread. You see my needle's right there. I'm going to pull the thread and I'm going to make a little loop. We're going to go up through that little loop and we're making a kettle stitch. So you're going up through the little loop and pulling, and it makes a little knot. We're ready to add on our next signature. Check it out. Looks good, huh? Take your next signature, double check that the arrow is pointed up, just like before, and then lay it atop the book. We're going to go in that first hole, but we're coming from the other direction this time. Go out the second hole. That's what it should look like. Pull the thread through, and then we're going to loop those two threads that came out the second hole of the signature below. Go from the right to the left, pull the thread. Sorry, I bumped the camera. And then we're going to go into the third hole of the signature that we're working on. So go through the hole, pull the thread through, then go back out the hole that you came out before. So poking the thread through. This time is a little different because what we got to do, we have to make the pattern the same as going the other direction, right? So we're going to catch those three threads, the one that we just crossed, and the other two that connect that last signature to the one below it. pull the thread, adjust it if it's twisted, and then go back in the hole directly above. That has made the second level of the cross. And because we caught those 3 threads, they match. Go out the next hole. We're making the next part of the ladder stitch. We're trying to keep the same pattern. So this time we're also doing that kettle stitch. We're going to go down below and catch the thread that connects the signature below, go from the left to the right, and we're making that little loop. Sometimes I have to tap the loop to make it stay open. Go through the loop and we're going to pull the thread. You'll notice it makes a little kettle stitch. Take the thread across, and this time remember we got to make the pattern match, so go from the left to the right. We don't have to do the kettle stitch this time because we want this side to be a mirror image of the one that we just stitched. So that's what it should look like. Now you're going to go directly through the hole right above it into the current signature that you're sewing. Pull the thread, and then you'll go out the next hole. We will repeat the same process for this cross as we did on the one before. The first step you'll do is catch the first 2 threads below that connect the last signature. So catch those 2 threads, go from the right to the left, pull the needle, and then we'll go in the next hole of the current signature. If you have to adjust the thread, that's fine. Pull the thread through. Go back out the hole that you just came out of, and that makes the first cross. Then we're going to cross over, but like we did on the last one, we're going to catch the first thread that crosses and then the other 2 threads that connect that last signature. So go from the right to left. You're going to catch all 3 threads, go a little bit slower, adjust the X if you have to. Sometimes I take the needle and I use it to shift the X back, pull the thread, and then go back in the hole right above it. This sewing has 2 different ways of doing the crosses so that the pattern stays the same no matter what direction. Next, go out that last hole and we're making a kettle stitch. Go from the right, catch that thread, make your little loop, and then go up through the loop that you just made. Sometimes I have to put the book on the table because my fingers don't want to hold the book and make the kettle stitch. So I'm going up to the loop, and then pull the loop, and that makes your kettle stitch. There's what it should look like. You'll notice that the threads cross, the same thread crosses. Either way that we sewed it, it still crosses. And now we're ready for the next signature. Double check that the arrow is pointed the same direction as before. Lay your signature atop the book, and now we're repeating the same pattern that we sewed when we added the second signature. Go out the second hole, catch those first 2 threads that connect the signature below, and then go across to the third hole. Pull the thread through. Go out that second hole again. That's what it should look like. Catch those 2 threads that connect the signature below. Go from the left to the right. Pull the thread. Adjust the X if you need to. Then go back in the hole just above it. Pull the thread through. Go out the next hole. We're moving on to the ladder stitch. Remember, this first one, we need to do a kettle stitch. You're going from the right to the left. Catch the thread below. You make your little loop. Go up through the bottom of the loop. Tighten it up, but don't wrench it. Go across the other side. This time you're going from the right to the left. Pull the thread, then go directly above into the hole of the signature you're currently sewing. Go out the next hole, just like the previous cross. What we're doing is we're going down below and we're catching those 2 threads from the left to the right. Catch those 2. And pull it across. Now go back in the next hole of the current signature. Pull the thread through, go back out that last hole. Go across and catch those 2 bottom threads that connect the last signature. Adjust the thread if you need to, and then go back in the hole directly above of your current signature. You'll start to find you get the hang of it. It's kind of cool. Now go out the last hole. We are doing a kettle stitch, but we're going from the left to the right. So catch that thread, make your little loop, and then go up through the loop, pull it, and you're ready to add the next signature. That's what it should look like. We are now ready for signature number 5. Check that the arrow is pointed up, then go through the first hole. We're working our way back. Go out the second hole. You're working from the right to the left. Catch those first 2 threads, pull the thread through, take the thread across, then go into the third hole. Go back into the second hole, pull the thread out. Now this is the time that we catch the 3 threads. We go underneath from the right to the left, the first one that crossed and the other 2 the length of signatures, going through all 3, and then go back into the third hole. You will most likely run out of thread while you're sewing. I purposely cut mine short so I could show you how to do a weaver's knot. It's too short to go across, so what I'm doing is waxing a new piece of thread. Hold the new piece of thread in your hand. First, make a loop, then make a second. You want that thread running across the front. Now, take the second loop and stick it under and through the first. Pull both strings a little bit, and what you're making is a little bitty lasso. Now, take the lasso and put it over the string that is running out. Then take both sides of the new string and pull. You'll feel a snap, and your knot is tight. Now clip off the excess and you can keep on sewing. Out hole number 4, and we're making the loop from the left to the right to catch that thread to start our ladder stitch. Go through the little loop and then pull the thread tight, and now go across, and you're going to go from the left to the right, catch that thread, and then you're not making the kettle stitch this time. You're just going straight up into the hole directly above in the current signature that you're sewing. Pull the thread through and then go out the next hole. Go from the right to the left and catch those 2 threads. Then go across to the next hole in the current signature that you're sewing. Pull the thread through. Go back out the last hole. Then once again, we're going to catch all 3 threads, the thread that went across and the other 2 that connect that last signature. Take your needle, and you can fix the X if you need to, and then go back in the hole directly above in the current signature that you're working on. Pull the thread through. Go out the very last hole of the signature, and we're making our kettle stitch. Go from the right to the left, pull the thread and make your loop. Tap your loop if you need to help open it up, then go up through the loop and pull the thread tight. Now we're ready for our very last signature. Normally, when you sew a book, you sew the last signature and the cover together. It is very difficult to do with this binding, and so I've eliminated that stress. So we're going to sew the last signature exactly like we have the ones before. So first up, you're going to go in that last hole, pull your thread, go out the next hole. Catch those 2 threads going from the left to the right, go across and go into the third hole of the current signature that you're sewing. Pull your thread through, go back out the second hole and pull your thread. Catch the 2 threads that connect the 5th signature from the left to the right and go back up into the current signature that you're working on. Go out the next hole. This time we're making the kettle stitch, so pull your thread through. Then you're going to loop from the right to the left, catch that thread, create a little loop, go up through the loop. Pull it tight, then go across to the other side, loop that thread that connects the signature below from the right to the left. No need for the kettle stitch. You're just going to loop it and go straight up into the signature that you're currently sewing. You'll know if you pulled it too tight because the threads want to squeeze together, so loosen it up if you need to. Pull the thread through, then out the next hole. Catch those 2 threads from the left to the right and pull your thread through. Go in the next hole of the signature, and then back out the last hole. Catch those 2 threads from the left to the right, and then go up into the hole of the current signature that you're sewing. You are almost done. Go out the very last hole, and it's time for our kettle stitch. Go from the left to the right and catch that thread. Go up through the loop and pull it tight. We're ready for the back cover. Lay the back cover on top of your book, then take your needle and go through that first hole from the outside of the cover to the inside. Stay to the right and go between the front cover and that first signature. You can take a second to untwist the thread if it gets twisty. Then what we're going to do is we're going to loop around the thread that connects the first signature. So I'm holding the remaining thread out of the way. I'm looping from the left to the right and I'm pulling the thread. You can tighten it up if you need to. That's what it should look like. Then go from the left to the right and loop one signature below. We're going to make a kettle stitch, and then you're going to go up through the loop, pull your thread, tighten it up if you need to. That's what it should look like. Go back into the signature that you're working on, which is the last signature. Pull your thread through. Try to avoid the other thread as you go through the hole. Go out the next hole. We're going to go ahead and go through the outside of the cover. Once again, we're going to stay to the right. It's going to want to get caught on the pages of the last signature. Just take your time. That's what it should look like. Catch that thread that connects that last signature. Make sure the other excess thread stays out of the way and pull your thread. Tighten it up. Go from the right to the left and catch those two threads that connect the next to last signature. We're making a loop. Go back into the hole that you just came out of. Pull the thread through and tighten it up if you need to. That's what it should look like. We're going to repeat the same process. We're going to go through the outside of the cover. We're going to stay to the right, pull your thread and straighten it up if you need to. Then loop that thread that connects the last signature to the cover. We're going from the left to the right, pull your thread, and then tighten it up, adjust the cover if you need to, and then we're catching those two threads that connect the last signature to the second to last signature. I'm going to catch them from the right to the left, and then we're going back in the hole of the very last signature. Pull your thread through, go out the next hole. It's going to want to get tangled on the corners of the book. Just take your time, pull your thread out, go in the top of the cover, then stay to the right, pull your thread, loop the thread that connects the cover to the signature, tighten it up, and then go one signature below, catch that thread. We are making the kettle stitch. Go back through the loop, pull your thread, tighten it up, and then we're going across to make the ladder. So remember, this time we don't have to do the kettle stitch, but we are going from the left to the right, loop that lower signature, and then we're going to go straight up into the cover. And going between the cover and that first signature. Just like before, we are going to loop the thread that connects the cover from the left to the right, tighten it up, and then go back into the hole. Go out the next hole, pull your thread through, go in the outside of the cover, stay to the right, pull your thread, tighten it up. Now catch the thread that connects the cover, tighten it up. Then we're catching those two threads that connect the next to last signature to the signature that we're sewing, which is the last one. You're making a loop. Go back into the hole, go out the next hole, pull your thread, go into the outside hole of the cover, then stay between the cover and the signature, stay to the right, loop the thread that connects the cover from the left to the right, catch the two threads that connect the next to last and last signature to make your loop, go back into the hole of the last signature, go out the last hole, go into the outside of the cover, stay to the right, pull your thread, catch the thread that connects the cover and the last signature. Go down one signature below from the left to the right. We're making a kettle stitch. You're making a little loop. Go up through the loop and back into the last hole of the last signature. You have sewn your book. So let's tie off the knot. You can tie it any way you want. Normally I do 2 little half hitches by catching the thread, making like a little loop and going through it twice. And then this time I was so excited, I just made a little granny knot and didn't quite get it where I wanted it. So really any knot works, however you want to tie it off. If it gets too thick, you can always smash it down. So yeah, and it's up to you. You can leave a tail or you can choose to clip it off. Thank you so much for joining me today in this book tutorial, and I plan on doing many more in the future. Have a great day and happy arting!